with this one. Welcome to the show, Matty. What's going on, brother?
What's up, JD? Great to be here, man. I love the opportunity to be able to sit and just talk about all things recovery and how it works for each of us.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Matt's been on the unlicensed therapist show already. We had a doozy of an episode, and then I had you on as a guest speaker on my Narcotics Anonymous meeting that I do Thursday nights, and that was a great share too. 20 minutes, and who knows how long this one will go. I shared the other night. Actually, I was a speaker the other night, which I didn't have myself marked down at all. And then the person flaked last minute, and then I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, maybe it's a sign that it's my turn to share. And I ended up going like 23 minutes. I'm like, how did he fit this in under 20 minutes? I can't fit this in under 20 minutes.
Oh, buddy, I excluded so much.
Oh,
Like I
so
said,
did I,
man,
man.
I invite my higher power in, and what needs to come out is what comes out.
Yeah,
Even if it's not what I wanted to say, that's the end.
yeah. Well, my favorite. Well, we were talking about being unhinged.
Yeah.
Now, and let's start with this real quick, and then we'll pop over to that again. What's your sober date?
June 7th, 2019. Sober,
So
clean date, whatever you want to call it.
sober, clean date, yeah, recovery date, June 7, 2019. So you got a little over 6 years then, 6 years and some change.
Yep.
Now, you were saying you felt unhinged this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this the most unhinged you could say you felt in a while?
Absolutely. Probably about 4 years, man.
Okay. Anything specific going on?
I don't have a problem putting it out there. In a relationship with this wonderful woman that was going through something with her ex and finally got closure. And it's one of the hardest things in the world for me because I didn't do anything wrong. And it's not that it's over just asking to take a step back, but in our minds, that's not what we hear. And the thing is, I continue to see she's being true to her word, still interacting, still wanting to hang out, just take that step back. But in my mind, that does not work.
Yeah.
So it has put me on that emotional roller coaster of insanity like none other. I mean, just be about an hour before this, I did a 10-minute ice bath just so I could feel something. So,
Yeah.
yeah, even held my breath underwater for 2 minutes just to show myself I could still do it.
That's a wild 10-minute ice bath. That's intense,
Yeah,
bro.
yeah. Feel alive, man. Feel ready to go.
Yeah, that'll get you there for sure. When did you start doing ice baths? What does that do for you? Because I've
I've been
seen like
doing it
like
for
Joe
no
Rogan and shit do
problem.
it, but like
Dude, this goes back to my trauma. So my trauma was
yeah,
really getting bad, and my trauma therapist is like, "Hey, man, we're kind of at an impasse. I don't know how we're gonna move any more forward because we had processed everything we could, and there still was something hanging there, and it wouldn't shift." And I'd heard a little bit about him in the halfway house. The owner of it that I worked with regularly, he was like, "Hey, man, my buddy's doing them. Come check it out." And it was like they talk about the convergence or the switchovers about a minute and a half to 90 seconds. They said they watched me, and in less than 15 seconds, I was in. I had
hmm,
switched over, and they said, "This is the thing you need to hear." And I teach ice baths now. It's crazy. I go around treatment centers and do presentations and all this stuff. They're like, what that would tell us is you've got a lot of trauma. And I just looked at them and I was like, yeah, yeah, there's a lot of trauma, man. It's the one place your trauma can be a superpower is in an ice bath.
yeah,
Of course, not everybody's ready for them. That's one of the goals is to explain the benefits and that nobody has to do it. I usually start around 48 degrees for newcomers, or if I've got somebody's got a heart condition around 55, and I'll guide them through it.
that's quite
Of
the
course,
guy, bro.
I just did 39 degrees. So, like I said, I am delusionally insane, buddy.
Now, are they like expensive to set up at home?
You can get an inflatable one for probably around like 200 or 300 bucks, and you can either
Oh,
add
that's not
ice or get
bad.
a chiller
No,
for
that's
300 or 400. So, I mean,
and
I've
then the
also got
ice.
a 150 gallon Rubbermaid tub that I've coated and everything, and I kind of carry around with me for the big demonstrations.
Hmm. Okay, that's not bad. And then obviously you need all the ice.
Yeah, which you get closer to this time of year, it's not as bad in the summer. Could be 8 to 10 bags, but I mean, usually people are pitching in if I'm doing it for like a group or something.
Yeah, that's true. That's cool. You know, I know I've seen that like people get the ones like installed in their home and shit like that. You know, like because I watch a lot of podcasts too. This is a podcast, but you know, I watch a lot of podcasts of like comedians, and ever
Yeah.
since Joe Rogan got into it, then you know, I watch like Bert Kreischer and you know a lot of other Tom Segura, and they always talk about ice baths and shit like that too.
Yeah, I've got an inflatable tub that fits in my bathroom. 'Cause my bathroom's huge, and
Hmm.
I can still use everything in the bathroom, and it's great for me. Usually, what it is, 5:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday, and then I take either Saturday or Sunday off. I used to do it every day, but I found that one day of rest was really important for me.
Good for your body. Yeah.
Hmm.
Not you know,
Because I
it's like
can I can get into that commitment where it becomes so delusional in my mind. I got to keep this commitment versus the
yeah.
reality is I've got to also give myself that grace when I'm like, you know what, today I don't need to do this, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's like anything else that like sometimes anything is too much for your body every day of the week. Like even
Hmm.
washing your hair, you shouldn't wash your hair every day of the week. You know, it's stupid shit like that. So let's get into some of your story, bro. 6'7". Now I know usually I like to talk about you know what it was like, what happened, and what's it like now. Now for someone like you, it's a little different because you've been through 57 rehabs, right?
58, yeah, 58
58.
inpatient treatment centers.
Yeah, 57 didn't work. 58 times the charm. Um,
Yeah, I should get a
so,
shirt made that says that.
now, now, when was, how old were you when you went to your first rehab? Do you remember?
26 years old.
How old are you now, bro?
I am 45.
So 39. So
Yeah,
26 to 39 in 13 years, you hit up 58.
yeah. There was one ludicrous year, buddy. I think I went to like 18 in a year. There were a few AMAs involved in that. Plus, I had this belief my heroin maintenance program was going to work. So I would sit in treatment for 21, 45 days, being that A+ student in treatment, but knowing full well the moment I got out. And one of the times it was less than 15 minutes, man. It didn't take long. So it's, I don't know if that doesn't prove that I was, unhinged in that time, but I mean, it was one of those things. I was really sick, sick,
Yeah.
sick, sick.
Now, where were you born and raised?
I was born in New Milford, Connecticut, and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay, did you spend a lot of time in Connecticut before you went to Indiana?
No, no, my dad's, my grandfather, my dad's dad was a doctor. So that's how we were out there. And then my dad worked in Fort Wayne, Indiana for a company called Phillips Magnavox, which became Hughes and now is Raytheon.
Yeah. Philips Magnavox as in like the TVs and shit?
No, this was more the defense side. This was
Okay.
their lesser known, but it kept getting bought out as they separated and went forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brothers or sisters?
I got a half brother and a half sister. I prefer to look at him as my brother and sister.
Yeah. Okay.
Richard, otherwise, he goes by Rico. Love him to death. He's a doctor at ETSU. Incredible man. Has raised 6 kids. I've got my sister Angela, married. Her kids are dogs. That's okay. That's just what she loves. She
Yeah.
lives in Columbia City, and my brother lives in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Okay. So,
Both
are you
older.
the oldest, youngest, middle?
I'm the youngest by about 9 or 10 years.
Oh, okay. So now, are your brother and sister both from like your mom, both from your dad, or one from each?
So one from each.
Oh, wow.
One from
Okay.
each. Yep.
So they were both like married previously before they met and had you.
Yes. Well, my mom was
Okay.
not married. My mom was
Okay.
not.
Yeah, same difference. I don't really give a shit about that part of
I
it.
was just say I don't want to
Yeah.
get into the details of that.
Yeah, we
That's
don't
not
need to
something
get.
I'm
Yeah.
going to share in a podcast.
No, it's not your. Yeah. All right. So they had one had your brother, one had your sister, and then they got together, and then they had you. Were
Yep.
your parents married when they had you?
Yes.
Okay. Did they stay together?
I got divorced when I was 13. Possibly it looked like it was going to happen around when I was 10. That's where a lot of my shame came from because, I kept being told it wasn't about me. But it was one of those things as a child, as I understand from being a therapist today, a child can only see when things are breaking down that it is about them. They've
Yeah.
done something wrong. I'm a bad person. This is
It,
why this is happening.
was it split custody?
Um, so it's gonna sound really delusional to you, man. My parents got divorced. They lived in the same subdivision. So if I got pissed off at one, I could go to the other's house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it even got worse. My mom became the president of the association, I believe in some ways just to screw with my dad.
Now,
However, the
did that?
one thing I have to say about my parents, anything that came up for me involving me, they came together and put their differences aside to be there in a united and supportive front.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome to know. Um, so my parents, they stayed together until the day my dad died. So I can't relate to that, but I have had a lot of guests on from divorce, and I have learned a lot of things. Now that you said a lot of shame and guilt came around 10 years old when they started like splitting up and everything. Was that guilt felt because you were just getting passed around like from one to the other, and then you felt guilty like they don't want me around? Is that what it was like, or what was that like?
I believe I wanted my parents to be together. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really understand things yet. I can also remember being sent to a child psychologist. That my hat is off to those people that do the child psychology work. I've dabbled in it a little bit, and I can remember being told to draw things in the sandbox, and I would just shut down. I couldn't talk about it. I mean, in a number of ways, it did make my relationship with my father stronger because he worked all the time. I mean, it was one of the things I think I talked to you about before. We had this commitment. We were going to a movie every weekend, even if we'd already seen all the movies, we'd go see something again. Um, my dad was a little bit more present in my life after that. There were a lot of different things going on, but also that shame and guilt was I didn't know who I was. And I can remember like, it was shortly after I kind of had this rejection in the religious system of I had this incredible pastor when I was 3 years old that always told me I could do whatever I wanted and I could ask him questions and he would be straight with me. And then there was the new pastor who came in and I was a little bit older and I remembered asking him about faith and he told me, well, you believe because it's your job to believe. You don't question that. And that caused, looking back, that caused something inside of me to pull away, but I'd still
Mm-hmm.
go. And I think I'd already started to build a resentment towards religion.
Yeah.
And it was it's fascinating to look back and to be able to see that because I find that when I share that story, not from my point of view, but hey, somebody I know intimately or close in the therapy office really resonates with people to let them know it was okay to feel the same way.
Yeah. Now you grew up in the heyday of going to the movies
Hmm.
because we're almost the same age. You're a couple years older than me,
Yeah.
and I went to the movies all the time in the '90s. Which if you were going to movies with your dad as 10 years old, that means the '90s because you were born in
Mhm.
'80. So or '79 or '80, but either way, the heyday was the '90s. Was there a type of genre that you and your dad would like to go to the most?
We loved action and spy. I can remember my first rated R film. It was Die Hard with a Vengeance. And actually, I still use a line from, I'm a huge movie quotes guy.
Yeah, me
So,
too.
Simon Gruber is on the top of the building and his plan's coming off. And I use this with clients about recovery. They
Mhm.
balked hook,
Yeah.
line, and sinker.
Yeah.
It's like, you gonna jump all the way in or we gonna dabble our toes? But I,
Yep.
I still remember that movie. I have it on Blu-ray 4K. It's something I'll pull out
It's
sometimes and just think of my
it's my
father.
second favorite Die Hard, without a doubt. Without a
Yeah.
doubt. Die Hard 1 is my favorite. It's hard to beat Die Hard, even though it's him by himself the entire movie. But Die Hard with Vengeance is by far, it's not even close. It's my second favorite Die Hard.
I
Um,
actually like Live Free or Die Hard because I'm a huge Timothy Olymplant fan, and the
mhm.
way he
It
does
was
that
good.
villain, he
It
just
was good.
chews scenery. But I
It was,
get it. Yeah.
yeah. It was good. And I loved Timothy Olyphant. I thought he was great. I just watched him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think he's great in that movie. He only has like really one scene in it, but he's great in it. But yeah, Die Hard. My dad, may he rest in peace. He always told me his story of he used to work in sales in the '80s when I was born, and he was bored one day and he had nothing much going on, and he went to the movies by himself, and he went in and saw this movie Die Hard by himself, and had no idea what to expect, and he walked out and goes, "What did I just watch? Like that was amazing! Like that was amazing."
Yeah,
Um,
that and the Under Siege movies. Under Siege 1
yeah,
was
okay,
incredible.
yeah,
I enjoyed Under Siege 2. I mean,
mhm,
I liked a lot of Steven Seagal's films.
yeah.
I just enjoyed the action.
Yeah, Steven Seagal was great in the 90s. And then now he's not so now he's like hanging out in North
He's
Korea and
he's um he's gone somewhere.
shit. He's like a cop and everything now, or whatever
Yeah,
he wants to be. He's like a 300-pound cop or something. He's a funny guy. That's all I
he is.
know. But that's a great bonding experience. A great memory. Is your dad still alive?
No, he died in 2017. He was part of the catalyst that we'll get forward to me actually getting clean and sober.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And we'll get into that. We'll catch up to that then. So you're going through the 90s. You're kind of back and forth with your mom and dad. Is there a point in which in the 90s where you discovered drugs and alcohol, or which one came first, chicken or the egg?
So I had a knee injury and I was put on prescription Oxycontin and I took it as prescribed. No issues whatsoever. However, I couldn't play soccer anymore. And they diagnosed me with ADHD at like 4 years old. So I was like one of the test cases for Ritalin. So they
Okay.
fried my brain is the best way to put it. I
Mhm.
think I was on 150 milligrams when I was 6 years old. I
Oh,
had to
shit.
take it in the morning, twice
Yeah.
at school, twice when I got home, once before bed. And it didn't start like that. They just like, okay, he's still very hyper. And here, let me make sure I say this. I have nothing against my mom. She got what she was looking for out of it. Um, when my dad died, I found his journal and there was something written in there that really kind of put some things in perspective. His dad, being a doctor, had told him, if you let them put that on your son, no longer have any dreams or aspirations for your child because he will be nothing. I have no problem telling you when I read that, it was like,
Interesting.
fuck,
Yeah.
apologize for cussing, JD.
No, I told you
Dad,
before. You're not a curse, dude. I curse
yeah,
by now.
yeah.
I can't.
So what happened with the Ritalin? It turned me into a zombie. So
Mm,
bad when my mom took me off of it cold turkey, that dose, they put me on prescription ephedrine. And I could still fall asleep standing up in school. Like you fall asleep, teachers say stand in the front of the room.
yeah.
I could fall asleep standing up. My body was going through withdrawal like it never
Yeah.
knew. But once that disappeared, I had my first taste of alcohol and wasn't crazy or anything. But the next one should have shown you I had a problem with substances immediately. Was I can remember my dad was out of town and he always gave me the keys to the house. I had a bunch of kids over from high school and we had gotten rum, gin, vodka, and tequila. And I'm missing one. There's another one. Hang on. Scotch. Yeah. And we were going to have a shot every hour.
How old are you at this time?
18.
Okay.
And what you should have known, the problem was I was
Yeah.
sneaking back every 15 minutes to shoot more. And that night, I remember ended up with me being held over the toilet and forced to puke by two girls. Also, I was told in that time I threw a buddy off of my dad's sunroof. He threw me down the second flight of stairs. But then we were like, hey, that was part of the deal, man. Uh, you know, I can also remember singing karaoke to Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing.
That's a tough song to hit.
Oh, I could get the high notes, man. I loved it. That's get that.
Oh man. Yeah, those are some rough ones. Doing power hour with liquor at 18 is a rough look.
Yeah, I
It's
think
a
I took
tough
a
look.
step back for maybe like a week and I just started drinking Boone's Strawberry Hill, but that didn't satisfy me. And I want to say drugs came into the picture actually around 20. And when those kicked off, man, it was game over.
Yeah. What's crazy is I was talking about the other day, the alcohol just stopped working. I drank for so long in my early teens and my adolescence and preteens through my teenage years into my early 20s.
Hmm.
And 21 I went so hard going to the bar, and I turned 22, and the month I turned 22, which was September of 2008. I was because I turned 20. My birthday's at 29, so in a couple weeks, and I remember I was looking for something different. I tried acid, I tried mushrooms, I tried ecstasy. I was trying. I did a lot of coke that month. I had done coke before, but I did a lot of coke that month. But I was like trying to find something different because the alcohol just wasn't hitting the spot anymore. And then I turned 22, and then a couple weeks later there was a drought with weed because there was always like a drought around election time, and it was hard to get weed. And I ended up coming across like perk tens, and they set me off on a 10-year run of opiates that I could not come back from, for a decade, for 9.5 years, because once I tried those, I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. This is it. It's that moment of arrival that they talk about in the big book. The I have arrived moment. Yeah. So
I love how an old timer says it down here. It's like I was coiled so tightly, and I can even remember. I don't remember it the first night, but I remember it like the third night. It was like that spring finally released, and it was.
Yeah.
And that's how I can remember it. And I would love to tell you that's where alcohol stopped working for me, but I didn't know about these other things like 151. And then when I found Everclear, I mean, you'll get to hear about that.
Yeah. No, I had that moment within 15 minutes, though. Within 15 minutes of trying opiates, I sat down. I see you dip. You ever smoke cigarettes too?
Actually, funny story about that. I only smoked for a month of my life in high school because a girl got me to start doing it. And I found out my dad was diagnosed with COPD emphysema, and I made a commitment to myself that what was going to kill my dad wasn't going to kill me.
Yeah. Nice.
I dip now, or I pouch now. Before that, when we'll get to it, when I got sober, I had never really touched nicotine. And with that hole in my arm, they were like, look, dude, they keep putting you on fentanyl patches, and that hasn't worked the last 3 times you've gotten sober and tried to do this. So I found vaping, and I went off the chain vaping, like 120 watts, 6 milligram.
I was going to just say, I can see you the big mod. I could see you using the big ass mod and shit.
I've still got one of them in my room, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I never liked vaping, but I started smoking cigarettes at 13. I learned how to inhale with a Black and Mild at 12, and and I remember sitting back in my recliner, the opiates just kicked in, taking a drag and going, like, oh man, what is this? And that I had it right away, and I still drank, but only to keep up appearances because, I wasn't going to let everybody know I was doing pills every day. The only people that knew I was doing pills every day were the people I was doing pills with every day. Besides that, nobody's going to know. So if I had to keep up appearances and look fucked up, I would have a drink in my hand and make it, I've had 7 drinks. I've only had 1. I just been doing pills all night, and that's the kind of thing, my family parties and stuff like that. And, keep up appearances. But I wasn't like drinking heavy because all I needed was those pills. You said 20. What was your introduction to drugs? What happened?
Snorting oxys. I'd gotten a hold of them, and then, the actual thing is,
it should have been year 2000.
Yeah, there was a man that I knew from Romania, and his father had claimed political asylum in the United States.
Okay.
And he had hurt his back. However, Farmer Purdue was just shipping ungodly amounts of opiates to this man that he didn't take. So we had like Ziploc bags full of 80s, 40s, 20s, 10s, and the 5, the capsules. And they were coming every month. And yeah, it got bad quick, man. I mean, I think I started with a half of an 80 and threw up that night.
Yep,
Drank on top of it, but then quickly I got up to where I was doing 4 to 5, and in my heyday I would snort 20, and that was until somebody showed me I could shoot them.
Yeah.
And then the game really took off when I started shooting. And I still remember the first night. I had to have somebody else shoot me up because I didn't know what I was doing. And this girl looked at me, and she's sober now in Indiana. I love her to death. I'm going to give you her first name, Autumn. And she looked at me and goes, the needle is a monster. This will be the death of you. And I can remember thinking to myself, sign me up. Because that's what we do when we're young and we're looking for the next experience. And you're talking about your release again, that aha moment I have arrived. First time somebody shot me up with heroin or oxy. I think it was heroin first, and then we went back to oxys. That was that moment. I can remember nodding out for like 25, 30 minutes, coming to and being like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I remember telling myself not every day, just on the weekends, but of course you already know it becomes every day.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that represent that well. With Jersey Basketball Diaries with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about specifically what you just said. he says it starts off as what we call, I think he says a chipper or a chippy, where we just do it on the weekends. And next thing you know, it's Tuesdays too. And then it's Thursdays. And before you know it, it's every single day.
Yep. Every single day that ends in Y.
Yep. Every single day ends in Y. And, the Oxys, man, in the year 2000 to 1998 to 2010 is unhinged. Speaking of unhinged, maybe the title episode is something about unhinged because unhinged. Because did you watch the TV shows about an Oxy farmer? Oxy and
I watched the one with Michael Keaton. That
was a very good one.
That one. I actually got to meet that man. He was here for a LADAC conference in Middle Tennessee. And
okay.
Just to get to meet him was so powerful. His name's escaping me, but he has a couple of treatment centers up there, and it was just an incredible conversation because I didn't want anything from him, and he grasped that pretty quickly. So we kind of went a little deeper. Yep. It's one of those things. They've got enough fans and enough worship. It's like, can we have a real conversation? You know.
But I was telling my wife, we were watching it together. When it first came out, we were watching it week to week, which is unusual for me. I don't watch shows week to week. I'll wait until they're all done, and then I'll sit there and binge them. And with this show, I had to watch week to week because of what it was, how close I was to living that life and being, I could be dead today. And so that episode comes on before Michael Keaton gets hooked. And spoilers, the show's been out for 6 years, so I don't mind spoiling it. Or 5 years. So, my wife is an alcoholic. And well, they wouldn't identify themselves as an alcoholic because they do recovery dharma, but you know what I mean. They were, a daily drinker. And never did drugs though, except for Suboxone one time. They were tricked into it. And, so we're watching it, and there's a scene when Michael Keaton's trying to get high, and the person that gives it to him is like, hey, why don't you crush him up and then snort him? Then you're really going to feel it. And he gets home that night, and it's really dim lights in his living room, and he gets him on the coffee table, and he grabs, the lighter or a spoon, and he crushes it up, and he makes the line, and he does it, and he sits back. And it's complete silence. There's no music playing. It's just him sitting back on him. And then it fades to black. And that's the end of the episode. And I said to my wife, I said, that was exactly what it was like the first time you snort a pill.
Absolutely.
I said, I've never seen such a representation of the quietness and the stillness, no matter if you're around people or not, of what happens the first time you snort a pill. And that it encapsulated it perfectly. And I thought it was so well done. I'm not here to glorify, glorify drug using, but, I was very, I don't want to say use the word impressed, but I was more surprised that they nailed it so well because you don't see that,
It's the one thing I respect Hollywood for in the entertainment industry. They do their best, well, some of them, to not glorify it. But when you can capture the reality that it speaks to those that, even if we're not in recovery yet, we're like, holy crap, I hear people know what I'm going through, but to actually see the remember, like immediately you and me go to like, I remember that. Yep. I remember that highly. And it's that relational ability that is so necessary in recovery that if somebody doesn't relate, or, I say it like this with clients, and I've said it to, our administration agrees. If they don't find somebody to attach to or relate to or have the smallest bit of trust to in the first 24 hours, it's pretty much a battle for naught. They've got to hear something that allows them to go, okay, I felt that too.
No, you're right, dude, because that happened to me with, you spent a lot of time in treatment centers, obviously, and in the last 6 years you worked in treatment centers, or how long?
I've worked in a little over 4.
So 4, okay, yeah. So I went to one rehab, one and done, and
my hat is off to you.
Yeah, I was 31 years old. I was 31 and a half years old, and I was sitting there the first 3 nights. I was in Los Angeles. And which is a big, treatment facilities, but in LA, they're not facilities; they're houses that you live in, and they take you to outside meetings, and you're mixed in with everybody else in those meetings. Usually, they take you to a neuter,
I went to a couple of treatment centers in California, but I know the model.
Yeah, so they'll take you to a nooner and they'll take you to a 7 or 8 o'clock at night meeting. And but when you're under detox under the first 3 days there, the first 72 hours, you can't go to the outside meetings yet. And I remember, sitting there. I got there on a Wednesday afternoon, and it was Friday night, and I spent the first 2 days talking to everybody in there. There might have been 20, 25 people total between men and women. And I'm a cigarette smoker, so I'm talking to everybody and bullshit with everybody. And I'm sitting there, and I'm depressed as fuck. It's Friday night, and I'm by myself in the house. And this guy, Big Mike, I'm still friends with this day. And this guy, Big Mike, and he sits down next to me, and he goes, "What's wrong, man?" And I said, he goes, "You're in beautiful Los Angeles. What's going on in your head? I see something's on your mind." And I said, I don't know if I made a mistake if I came here too early. He goes, "What do you mean too early?" I said, "I've never been to rehab before, Mike." I was like, "This is my first time in rehab." And everybody that I'm talking to, they're on their fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time here. Am I wasting my time spinning my wheels because I'm going to end up back here like everybody else anyway? And he was like, "How long did you spend in addiction?" And I said, 10 years on pills and 20 years with alcohol. He said, "Okay. And who made you come to rehab?" I said, "Nobody. I came here on my own. I chose to sign myself in." He said, "That's impressive." He goes, "You want to be done doing drugs?" I said, "Yeah, that's why I came here." He said, "Listen, it was April 20. If I got there on the 25th, it would have been April 27th, April 28th. And he said, you're here mid-July. You'll be able to give me my 10-year cake." And I've only been to one rehab, and I was 31 years old, and I'm 41 now. So stick around, and you'll be able to give me that 10-year cake. I said, "All right, deal." And he started taking me to outside meetings. Like when I got into sober living, the sober living was affiliated with the rehab itself. So, I was still friends with him. I would still see him all the time working at the sober living. And he would take me to NA conferences, to luncheons and, sponsor meetings, even though I wasn't even a sponsee. He would take me to those. He didn't have any sponsees, but I was part of his little sponsee family. And, it would be me and maybe two other people out of 400 people, the only white kids in Compton in these meetings. And I heard some of the best stories and the best recovery that you can imagine. And we're still friends to this day. We still bullshit all the time. He's supposed to come on my meeting soon to be my speaker, and he works 2 jobs. He works very hard in recovery. And yeah, he's got 17 years now. And
Awesome.
One rehab. And so he had that impact on me. If we go back what we're saying, he had that impact on me day 3 to where I got through rehab so I could give him, which I did. I was there in July to give him his 10-year cake in multiple different meetings. And it meant a lot to me, though. It meant a lot to me.
I love that, man. I mean, my sponsor's kind of the same way. 19 years old, went to rehab, never been back. I don't even remember now, 28, 29 years sober. And what he had that I wanted, I had one sponsor before that, but he just had this lackadaisical approach. Okay, what are we going to do? You told me what happened. Okay, you told me what you're thinking. I don't care what you're thinking. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? So let's go to spiritual principles. And it's just so, I can't find the word at this moment, but because hope doesn't do it justice. It shows me it can be done, and it can be done with a smile on your face.
Yeah, it can be. Let me see here. So who was that person for you then?
What, that I connected with this last time?
Yeah. Was there something in particular or someone? Was it somebody else that was in the rehab with you?
Yes. Day 2, his name is Zach L. And he is an interventionist now that's actually on the TV show Intervention. He's freaking badass, dude. I still get to see him at meetings, and we cut up and we have a great time together. And, there was this one client that him and me got into it a lot. I mean, and he's this big guy. And the joke generally was, I don't get paid enough to get between you two. Like, I understand when I see fights and I break them up, but what you two got going on, You're either going to work it out or one of you is going to kill the other. And I don't get paid enough to be determining that crap. However, that man I'm referring to, I got to make amends to about 9 months out of treatment. And, but what Zach L really did is he saw how hard it was for me, and he sat down and he showed me the set aside prayer. And he said, I want you to pray this 5 times a day. If you need to pray at 10, pray at 10. But I just want you to start praying this each day because, having been to so many treatment centers, uh, I felt like I knew the NA book or the AA book. And this was an AA boot camp. And it was one of those things, it was like it helped me to have a new experience entirely with that material and to start to be able to see it for what it is, but also for me to see me for who I was, what I had done to myself, or the choices I had made in life. I'm not a huge person about beating myself up anymore today. It's really strange. What I was talking to you about being emotionally unhinged this week is I've gotten to a place where I'm not blaming myself. I'm not blaming the other person. And it's like these emotions are just flowing in waves, but there's no ownership of them. And it's freaking, I'm not going to say it's exciting. That's what it really is, man. It's like, I can love the experience. I can embrace this for what it is meant to teach me. This is going to make me stronger. I hate it in the that's not fair. I dislike it in the process. However, I know there is incredible growth in this moment today. Being on here with you, like for instance, I've written a lot of books but never done anything with them. Also, I was writing a book on recovery that these people asked me to write, and I can never finish it because I can never stay sober. There's a lot of really dark stuff towards the beginning, but now that I've been sober 6 years, I just haven't had the desire to sit down and finish it. Talking with you, it's like crap. There's tons of people out there like us, and I don't know if my story is going to help anybody or not, but I'm not going to know unless I actually take that step and finish it and put it forward. And maybe
Yeah.
nothing comes of it. Maybe it turns out to be something else. I could care less. It's really about if I'm saying this right now, am I going to finish a commitment to myself?
And I think it could. I think it does resonate with a lot of people because there's a lot more people that have more than one rehab stay than one stay. Like less people are one and done like I am,
That
percentage
is,
wise, and you know the percentages because you work in rehab now.
yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen it even firsthand. You see how many in 4 years has there been a lot of people that you've seen more than one time come through there?
Buddy, I'm not going to get into treatment centers particularly, but there was one treatment center I worked at that was took a lot of lesser insurances. There was one
Mhm.
guy, I think, in the 9 months I was there, I saw 7 times.
Seven
Uh,
times in 9 months.
yeah,
Yes.
they might have been running his insurance too much. I don't know. Anyways, but where I work currently, there's people I've seen there 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
However, what's beautiful, you start to see the change in that
Yep.
third time, or sometimes even in the second. And it's really about what I continue to ask myself. It's not what do they need to change, what's my approach?
Yeah. How am I going to
Because
change in order to
yeah,
get things
so
done?
many people go, oh, they need to change, the treatment center is doing what the treatment center does. I continue to ask the question because it's what I was taught. How do I change? Because what I did the first time for them might have
You
been
know,
what they needed. However, how do I change my approach so I can be more understanding, more compassionate, more willing to listen, to give them that space?
yeah. Now, and that's my point. Is someone like you has an experience with so many rehabs and AMAs and hospital stays and psych wards, to where somebody could pick up your book and go, "Oh, I'm not the only one," or they pick up your book and go, "Someone's crazier than I am." Holy shit!
Yeah, yeah, I get that. It's one of those things that a lot of people, even in meetings today, struggle when I introduce myself as a delusionally insane addict or delusionally insane alcoholic. And it's like, I know who I am. I know the thoughts I have. I know I'm not healed. I am healing. Like I told you before,
Yeah,
I'm not changed. I'm changing. So by definition, I'm still insane. And my life is so much easier when I can continue to admit that and acknowledge that to myself. Now, do I believe a higher power can restore me to sanity? Absolutely. Didn't happen today. That's okay. Maybe it happens tomorrow. Here's the crazy thing, maybe it never happens, but that's okay because I'm practicing spiritual principles. And one of the most powerful things for me with old timers in meetings is when they can bring their struggles in and show me they're not perfect. And that's the
Yeah,
thing I have to remind myself of. I am nowhere near perfect.
yeah,
However, can I be as loving as possible to let people know where I'm at? And then, of course, the more difficult thing is when they say, "Hey, can I help you?" To actually be willing to accept help when it's offered. Because,
yeah.
we want to be fiercely independent, but the reality is we can't do this alone.
And you just reminded me. I have a question. So you mentioned spirituality and mentioned higher power. Um, I'm a recovering Catholic. I grew up Catholic, and I even went to Catholic high school for a year. And after that year, I was done. I haven't been back into church except for a couple baptisms. That's about it. And I pulled away from the Catholic Church. A lot of it was because of what was going on the inside, with priests and all that, where I didn't want to be affiliated with a program that did what they were doing. Now, did you grow up with any kind of religion where you pulled away from it at some point?
So I went to a Baptist church in Fort Wayne. Pretty much we went every week until the divorce, and then it kind of became my choice. And of course, I pulled away.
Okay,
I found my way back to church a couple of times, and then before I got sober, my mom started going to what they call a Free Methodist church, and it was pretty close to non-denominational, honestly. And they were so inviting and so loving. And it's also one of those things that there were a lot of things that I've heard in recovery that didn't resonate with me in this sense, because there were a couple of things the pastor invited me to do, even though he knew I struggled with drugs. I mean, his son did as well, but his son had kind of pulled away and wanted nothing to do with him. And I get that.
yeah,
I can remember helping build a playground or helping go and getting it and setting it up. And there was nothing I was interested in whatsoever in it. It was like, I need to do something for other people. And it's one of those things we hear in the room so much. Only thing it needs to change is everything. And it's like,
yeah.
I
Change one
get it.
thing.
It's a
That's it. That's it.
slogan. Yeah, I get it. It's a slogan, but it discounts when we're actually doing things that are selfless, because it can all of a sudden put that in the wrong light. But we also want to take a look, what was our motivation? What were our motives behind that? And I've really dug deep in that, and I had no motives. I got nothing out of it but to actually be a little bit clean for a few hours, and to help set something up for kids that I can remember being in the congregation the weekend it was unveiled and everything for the kids, and being asked as one of the people that helped him to stand up and get applause. And buddy, I struggled to get those compliments and everybody thanking me, because that was that internal thing. I can't accept these things because I don't believe these things about myself.
No,
So it,
no,
it it became a very powerful teaching.
no, when did you find a higher power throughout 58 rehabs? Did you not find it until the end? Did you find it halfway through and carry with you until, and then you kind of
Um,
piecemealed your recovery as you
okay.
went through rehabs and got stronger and stronger?
So my problem with my first couple of rehabs was, I had a foundation of God and everything, and I prayed all the time. This is going to sound crazy to you, but when I was traveling to Detroit or Chicago, I would always pray for safe travels before I went, and that no one would get hurt or anything. And I can remember the 3 times I didn't pray. One of them got pulled over by the cops, but I happened to be in Chicago, and they were only looking for violent offenders. So if you didn't have a weapon, get the hell out of here. Kind of a similar thing in Detroit, but the other time I didn't pray, I had a buddy driving and he nodded out and he took out a mailbox and didn't stop. All he had to do was stop. We had plenty of money and insurance in the car, but that's not how that went. And, we got arrested. However, I also remember getting the break of a lifetime because the DA called me and said the cops searched the car before any other cops were on scene. We can't determine what's what, so I'm not going to charge you. Um, of course, though, I was in the hospital because I had that wonderful hole in my arm by this time. And as soon as I got released from the hospital, I rented a car and went back and got more. So I hadn't, I got that incredible reprieve, but I didn't do anything with it.
Okay.
Also, the joke always was I believed in God. I prayed for God's guidance. And what I would simply say to you is God gave me everything I ever wanted. But what I found out, I didn't want any of it because it made me empty inside.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. You've mentioned a hole in your arm a couple of times now, and I think it's time to let the audience know what how long have you had what happened? Let's just start there. What happened, Matt?
Okay. 2016, I was working on my my race car, my '03 Cobra, and it's got hood pins in it that are, very long and stainless steel with cam locks. And don't ask me how, but somehow I had the hood up and the pins compressed down, locked in place, which makes absolutely no sense. And I had the intake manifold off, and I was working on getting a header bolt on the turbo headers, and my arm slipped and went up, and the pin went through the top and out the bottom, and I seem to remember a warm trickle in my head. And I reached forward and the pin tore everything out.
Holy shit!
So I can't do a stop sign or a thumbs up. Like with this hand, I can. This one, I can't.
Wow.
So severed 7 tendons, severed the nerve, chipped the bone. Of course, being an addict that I was, that was injecting things, the one thing it did do is it gave me great access to a vein I couldn't miss. That was really bad.
Wait, what? You were hitting a vein inside your open arm?
Yeah, couldn't miss it. It was throbbing.
Bro.
I told you, man, I am insane. Still insane, not as insane because I'm not using it anymore.
2016, so that was a couple years before you got clean. That was a few years before you got clean.
Yeah, and
How
every
long was
time I
that
went
open
to
for like that?
what was the oh, so every time I'd go to a treatment center, this would be the process. They would say, "Okay, yeah, come on in." I'd get there, medical would see me, send him to the hospital. I don't believe there was a single stay that I went to a treatment center where I didn't have at least a stay at the hospital for at least a checkup, or sometimes they'd keep me for a week or two because it was infected, and they'd put me on vancomycin and Zosyn. I screw the other one up, Restafol or Rustosifol, but they'd put me on like a cocktail of these things. And I remember one time I was in Florida. They decided they needed to operate because they were scared that the bone was infected from a test.
Oh,
However, the morning they were ready to do the operation, they had run one more test, and they rushed in before they were prepping me, and they said, "No, no, no, we just did a CRP, a cortical reactive protein test. The infection's only on his distalus in his wrist. You do not need to drill into his bone." And I can remember the relief I felt. I can also remember they had already given me a fentanyl patch to get me a little more limber. But dude, the general protocol at the hospitals, not all the time, was you would meet with the surgeon, the infectious disease doctor, because you have an
yeah,
open wound in your arm,
yeah,
the wound care team. I mean, at the end, we were pouring liquid colloidal silver into my arm and then having to use these special absorbent pads, and
yeah.
it would have to be changed twice a day.
I work in wound care. I believe it.
So,
You know.
so you understand what
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
yeah. I work for I don't work in the wound care center. I do scheduling for wound care. I do scheduling for orthopedics, podiatry, orthotics, and yeah, wound care.
Oh yeah,
So
I was a constant visitor to wound care centers all over the United States.
I believe it.
There were some doctors that would look at that and go, "That was 3 years ago. It doesn't appear to have healed." And I mean, there were a couple of failed skin grafts that they
Mhm.
tried, but I mean, it was just so deep and so much that I don't
Bro.
have it anymore. But they would always say they were going to try and take it off my back. And one time they couldn't get me rolled over. So they went so deep in my leg, it looked like a cheese grater for almost 3 months.
Now, we've bounced around quite a bit between 2000, 2006, and 2016, 2019. What happened? Your first rehab was in 2006 when you were 26 years
Hmm.
old,
Yep.
and you shot up for the first time when you were 20.
Hmm.
Um, anything significant happened in those 6 years in between 2000 2006 that we should know about?
Well, I got into racing.
You got
Don't
to
know
okay.
how I
Tell us
made
about
it.
that.
I got my '03 Cobra, and I don't think anybody can find it anymore, but there was a video of me 2 days after having it with the paper plate on it, a drag strip in Muncie, Indiana, and putting some times down that some of the magazines weren't even putting down. It was like I was addicted to adrenaline more than anything else, but when you mixed everything on top of it, and as far as I can remember, I was not driving drunk when I was racing whatsoever. I can't say high necessarily, so same difference.
Yeah.
um, but it was like the tunnel vision that I would continually get. It was the biggest high there was. And I may be good at talking to people when I need to put that mask on. So I had a number of sponsors that paid me a lot of money to sell product in the midway because that's what I was good at. And the racing was really inconsequential. But when I was winning, of course, they loved me, but they could care less whether I was winning or not. It was about selling products.
Yeah.
Um, it was really good. It was really bad. There were ups, there were downs, there were lots of women. At one point in time, I wondered if I had a sex addiction, but after exploring that, I do not. It was just that I didn't know how to give intimacy the proper value it's to have because it was something that was so readily available that I abused it to the point where at one time I may have had a problem, but it's one of those things I've done a lot of work around to take a look at. Because when I first came into the 12-step model and they were listing off all the options and everything, I was like, it might be easier to tell you what I don't need, you know? Um, and it was one of those things that I had so much fun traveling all over the United States, even into Canada a couple times. There are so many great memories from it, but there's also just so much pain. I can look back on it with fondness and love. However, it's also something I don't believe A, I need to go back to, or B, I can go back to anymore, considering I'm blind in one eye. My principles teach me I don't want to put other people's lives in jeopardy in a competition. I'm very careful when I drive. People joke you're a race car driver, but usually you're driving under the speed limit. And I was like, well, I have my principles I run by today.
Yeah. Now, so you start racing. What year did you start racing? 2003?
2002.
2002. Okay. Now 2006 rolls around and you're doing a lot of drugs.
Hmm.
Um, what was your deciding factor to go to rehab for the first time in 2006?
Well, in the beginning or the end of 2005, one of the guys I was hanging out with, John Yu, kind of took me under his wing, and I got to be part of his team and everything. He told me he was a devout atheist, and I loved having conversations with him because looking back, some of those conversations are very formative for me.
Yeah.
But the one thing I remember him saying is he wished he would have been there when his parents were dying. And that was his one huge regret. So when I get the phone call, my dad's sick. He's terminal now, and they don't know how long he's going to make it. Might not even be 2 years. I walked away from all that to be there for my dad, based on that conversation. I do believe, and I was really bad, and my dad loved me, so he was willing to send me to treatment. And it was one of those things that I also was telling myself, I'm getting better to take care of my dad, not for me. And you and me both already know that has a very low success rate.
Yeah.
um, First treatment was Fairbanks in Indianapolis. Went for a little over 2 weeks before my dad needed me to come home and help take care of him. There were another 10 treatment stays just like that, where my dad would be willing to send me to treatment. I was willing to go. Something would happen back home and he'd ask me to come home. And
Hmm.
the good little codependent, or, I would say loving son I was, I couldn't see that I needed to be where I was. And my dad was asking me for help. And I had made a commitment when I went back that I would be there for my dad till the end.
That
So
was all.
that was, well, it wasn't a commitment. It was a promise.
Yeah.
I try to live a life today where I don't make promises, and for some people that's a problem. However,
Mhm.
it's really about commitment for me, and devotion. And can I let my yes be yes, my no be no? Good old James chapter 4, or Matthew chapter 5. Your yay be yay and your nay be nay. It's one of those things that I find a lot of spiritual teachings that resonate with me for the spiritual pieces, not the religious pieces. Um, there were so many treatment centers bouncing in and out of there with my dad. And this is where things kind of started to get crazy with him, because he knew he was sick and he started to pick up drinking again. My dad is a pretty good example of the man of 30. Um, you know, Wild in his heyday and everything, and then he kind of got the family and the job and put it aside just for a party here or there. That's all he allowed himself. But when he was pronounced terminally ill, game on, baby.
Yep.
His drink of choice was Maker's Mark. That was not mine. That's when I really, really discovered I'd already had Everclear a couple of times, but that's when I started regularly drinking it. And that's when things got real bad because I was still doing my other substances.
That's a
Um,
tough look, bro. That's a tough look. Some
well,
Everclear and some heroin.
yeah, sometimes some other pills mixed in. Um, and I can remember for a period of about a month, I was starting to gain a lot of weight. So I started jogging like 5 to 10 miles a day, and I was still gaining weight because I didn't drink Everclear straight. I drank it with, I'd usually get like a 12 pack of Red Bulls, and I can finish the 12 pack of Red Bulls in that night in a fifth, or sometimes even at the worst points, a half gallon of Everclear. I really don't know how I'm alive today. Seriously, doctors have told me that before. They're like,
I don't know either.
I mean, you'll get a kick out of it after my dad dies. How much heroin I got up to doing a day got really wacky,
Well, let's
but
catch up to that eventually. Let's get there. So, 2006 to you're in and out of rehabs for years now. Between
hmm
2006 and like 2010, 2012, in and out of rehabs. You
yep.
keep going back to your dad to be there for your dad. You go home, you get high and drink again, and back to what you were doing.
But
Um,
one thing I want to say real quick, JD,
yeah,
we're taught that it's always about us first. This is another example. I made that promise to my dad that he would come first, and he did. I made sure he got to his appointments, his medications, all 27 of them. I still have them memorized in my head when he got each of them of those 3 times a day. I made sure he was taken care of. He had his food. He had what he needed before I got into my stuff. And that was the delusional piece, that I could always put my father first in front of my addiction. And I had a number of therapists who told me that's not possible. However, I would continue to dig deeper and deeper, and it's like I did it every time.
mm,
Um, so it's one of those things that I truly believe, each case is individual. Each of our recoveries can look different, but the question is, what's it a foundation of? But each of our experiences can be different. So, okay, I was able to do that, but how much sicker was I in other categories is what I really landed on. And I was extremely sick in every other place, JD. Okay. So I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh no, that's not me at all. I'm saying, the people, when they'd say that, that would cause me to shut down another, listen to another word they said, even though they might be giving me pearls of wisdom and genius.
no, that's how it goes though. Sometimes, man. Now, was there any kind of schooling at all during all this? Where and
Oh
you quit
yeah,
racing? And
I've
you
got a
quit
degree in
racing, right?
accounting, degree in economics, business administration, all those things. Somehow I was able to do those. I was going for my MBA, but I ran into a teacher that he gave me the greatest gift of all. He literally told me 12 credit hours away from my MBA in organizational leadership, if you do not attend every class, I will flunk you. And he kept his word to me, and I'm grateful he did, because if I would have gotten that, I don't know if I would be here today,
Why is that?
because that would have given me more access to more money and more resources, and it would have continued to tell me that I know what I'm doing, I'm managing my life well, and I'm
Yeah,
in control.
yeah. What did you have like a track record of not coming to class but getting good grades on tests, and that's how you kept passing?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, my accounting courses, I think I only had to actually attend four, because for whatever reason, my mind does numbers very well. I kept just testing out of class. They're like, if you try to test out of this class and you don't test, you're going to have to take these extra classes. And it's like, I'm willing to take that chance. And I'd get like a 95, 96. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's accounting's always come easy to me. I still do. Sometimes I'll help people do their taxes. It's something I just, for whatever reason, I still get a kick out of, but I try to stay away from it unless it's like a
yeah,
close friend, just because it brings back memories. That's what it really does, man. It brings back memories. And they're
yeah. I
not
can see that.
bad. It's just I choose to try to do new things in my life today.
Yeah, I might have to have you do my taxes come next year.
Maybe,
uh,
maybe JD. That's all I'm gonna
yeah,
say. Maybe.
yeah. Now, so you're getting all these degrees. Meanwhile, you're still getting high.
Oh yeah.
Are you still racing? You
I
you
only
quit
did that for
racing.
like 3 years at the top levels, and then I kind of cut back because it was getting harder and harder.
Yeah,
And then when I was taking care of my dad, I was dabbling in a couple of events here and there, and I still did okay to scratch that itch for speed and everything. However, the drugs and alcohol were taking over.
yeah.
Um, taking care of my dad became a full-time job, waking him up, making sure he got his medications. He loved to get bagels, so I'd go to the local bakery and get those in the morning. I would be making my arrangements to get my stuff, and that's when I was getting it daily before I found people asking around to get larger quantities so I could be set for a week. Which, of course, what was setting me for a week only started to last for 3 days. As our tolerance just goes through the freaking
Yeah.
roof. And
And I don't want you to take this as me thinking your dad was enabling you, but did he have the kind of money to support your habit while you were, was he like paying you to take care of him to
he
be able
was
to support
not
your
he
habit?
was he was not paying me to take care of him. I was using my own money at the beginning,
Okay.
until I had rushed through that. But I had, retirement accounts and all that. He didn't want me to touch that. So yes, my dad loved me nearly to death. He was an enabler.
Mm,
I was also the only one that was helping take care of him. My brother and my sister would come by, but they had their own lives. So I mean,
yeah.
I don't believe my dad liked that sometimes. I mean, it even got to a point when my dad and me were so sick together, my brother stopped bringing his kids around, and
Now
we've talked about that.
your older brother is the one that's from your dad from before. That's a doctor with 6 kids.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm caught up. No.
Doctorates in astronomy.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So he teaches at ETSU. He's a tenured professor.
Okay.
Incredible man. He's been, well, let me say this. Once I decided to get well, he has been very supportive, but he's kept his distance. I've got to make amends to a number of the kids, and I haven't really made a formal amends to him. We're working all that out right now because his life's getting a little simpler now with the last ones in college.
Okay. All right. Now you're going through in and out of rehab still, mid 2000s. I'm trying to play along. I want to get to recovery soon. And
Oh,
your
there were
dad.
spurts of it in those I might come back and be good for 15, 20, 30 days. You can only imagine, though, you're trying not to drink with a man who's drinking regularly, and he's
Yeah,
continually telling you he doesn't want to drink alone, so he's making you a drink, and your willpower is only so strong.
that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. And he didn't want to be alone, and
Hmm.
because he probably felt alone, given the fact that he was divorced and his other son wasn't around and was just you. And and being that sick, he probably didn't feel like he had friends. So I mean, it was just you at the end,
Yeah.
which is hard for somebody to go through by themselves. Um, so I understand why he did what he did. You know what I mean? I get it. It makes sense to me, at least.
Yeah.
And then he passed in 2017.
Yeah.
And then you spiraled for a couple years.
I bounced in and out. I think I went to, that's when I'd gone to about, I don't remember the number before that, but it was 39 after my dad died. So I'd been to about 19 before that. Um, that's when things got really bad. I mean, I was there for my dad's last breath. I was told it was going to be nice and peaceful. I want to give everybody a trauma warning that's watching. If you struggle with trauma, then turn away for a few minutes or mute it. I watched my dad's last breath. They told me it was going to be peaceful because all the morphine they had him on. I watched his body stand up on end as it took the last breaths on his head. I thought I would cry my eyes out. However, my dad had given me responsibilities. I think I cried for 30, 45 seconds, and then it was like, I've got things to do. I've got things to do. Um, I did those things, and it was, if I didn't have my drugs and alcohol, I don't know if I would have made it through that night.
Yeah.
That's how I'll say it today. It really fits in with that everything happens for a reason for me. Um, right after my dad's funeral services, the next day, my brother, my sister, my mother, and I was still working on people's cars on the side. So two of the guys' cars that I'd worked on barely knew me, except for in business interactions, all showed up for this intervention, pleading with me to go to treatment. And the interventionist was so kind, and we had a 2-hour drive to Indianapolis. We had some powerful conversations, and he looked at me at one point in time and he said, if you could ever get a year of sobriety under your belt, what you are truly capable of, from what I hear in your, when I'm getting down to your heart, you may be able to change people's lives. um I used to keep in contact with him regularly. It's probably about once a year now, but he still checks in on me. He likes to. He just when I got my license, he was overjoyed. He's like, now you can really make a difference. And I said, if that's what's meant to happen, that's what'll happen. Um, he was great. Of course, they took me to the hospital. I was pretty high at the time, and this was one of the time. Well, actually, it wasn't this time. It was when I went back because they got me there and they missed that there were some things I needed to sign that only I could sign. So they brought me home, and of course I did what addicts do. Got really high, and when I got back to the hospital, they did a good old drug test, and the doctor jokingly said to me, I believe he was joking. He's like, you might be the only person I can actually say this to. There may be more drugs in your system than there is blood. We have no idea how to detox you, so we're going to throw some things at you. And I think they had me on 40 milligrams of Suboxone a day.
Oh shit!
And they were giving me, I think, Ativan on top of it. I mean, they really said, we don't know if you're going to make it through this detox.
Were you
We
blind?
always hear
No, I knew
opiate
you.
addicts are never going to die of detox. This doctor looked at me and said, I'm not convinced that's true.
Now, earlier you mentioned being blind. Now, did this happen already? Did we skip that
Nope.
part? Okay.
Nope. That comes later.
All right.
You can only imagine racing from 0 to sometimes 200 miles an hour and hitting the brakes, your brain's smashing around inside of your skull, even with all the safety equipment in the world. So I was getting these concussions that necessarily weren't always getting diagnosed because I didn't like going to the doctor. You can only imagine, right?
Because
So
I already know they're going to tell you you got to stop doing drugs, Matt. They're gonna that's for me, and I complain about this because I have problems with doctors. I'm a big guy. And I always hear the same things is, you got to lose weight. You got to stop doing drugs. You got to quit smoking cigarettes. Well, I stopped doing drugs. I don't drink alcohol. I stopped smoking cigarettes. And now it's just my weight. So anything that goes on with me medically, it's like, well, you got to lose weight. It's like, no, it's more than fucking just me losing weight. There's other things going on with me.
Yeah.
So
one of the things I've found that's really helped with me regulating my weight is my trauma work and the ice baths. That's just me. I found it's unlocking those pieces that are all congested inside of me, and I just feel freer, and I actually have a desire to do something about it. I eat healthier than I've ever eaten. We'll get to it, but there were only two vegetables I ate before I came to this last rehab. That was corn on the cob slathered in butter, and once in a great while, green beans slathered in butter.
that I like how they're both slathered in butter, though.
Well, they had to have flavor. Well, I mean, hey, man, Indiana sweet corn can't be beat. If you haven't had Indiana sweet corn, try it sometime.
I have. I've been through Indiana a few times. No, I'm a big. See, I am a big vegetable guy, though. I am a big vegetable guy when it comes.
I am today. I am today.
Yeah.
Except beets. My dad created a resentment to beets for me that I don't believe will ever be addressed. However, I do have powdered beets in my protein shakes in the morning, so we're gonna say we're getting our beet supply.
No, yeah, I don't fuck with beets. Now the doctor tells you got more drugs than blood. Mm-hmm. What year is this? 2018, 2019, 2017?
That's 2017.
Okay. And obviously you're not done doing drugs yet.
No.
No. And you went through 38 rehabs within 2 years.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you keep leaving?
So the first one we went to, this is going to sound crazy. They got me out of the, I checked myself out of the hospital. My mom took me to a treatment center in Indiana, and Indiana Recovery. It was a great place. I just didn't want to be there. And I met two guys in recovery that I saw more pain in their face with what I was going through than anything else. And what I mean by that is, you check yourself out of hospital AMA and you're on 40 milligrams of Suboxone and you've been on it for 7 days, your brain is going to peel yourself if you don't get a medical detox.
Yeah.
This place did not have medical detox.
Oh.
So I was there for 3 days, and you want to talk about your brain wanting to kill itself. That's what pretty much happened.
That is so dangerous. It's ridiculous.
I don't know how I'm here today. However, one of their admissions people set it up for me to go to a place in South Florida, but I wasn't going till I saw my mom again. So they took me back to Indiana. Of course, I did what I did. I got high to satisfy the brain problem, and I went to a place called the Haven in South Florida. I was there for 7 or 10 days. 10 days. Of course, 3 days in the hospital, hole in the arm. People are scared, worried. However, what happened really built a resentment for me against the treatment center. They kept information from me. And when I found out, of course, I left. My mom was being rushed in for an emergency surgery for her appendix because it had possibly burst. Um, so I
And
went
they
home.
didn't tell you.
They didn't tell me that she was being rushed in. So I jetted out of there the moment I could and came home to be with her. And I don't know, I probably did need to be with her because she was so loopy. And when she was on pain medication, she didn't get up for 16 hours. I'm going to tell myself I needed to be there. However, it wasn't 3 days later, I was back into my drug addiction. And it wasn't shortly after that, maybe a couple of weeks before I needed to go back to treatment again. Um, my mom had also retired after my dad died to try and be there, but she went back to work because I was driving her insane. She couldn't watch me do what I was doing to myself.
Yeah.
And it just, it was usually, I mean, my mom is a saint in this because, 58 treatment centers, she didn't even know about the first really like 9 or 10. I mean, she only knew about 2 or 3 of them that I would actually communicate with her because I was only communicating with my dad because, like the addicts we are, we want to keep things compartmentalized. We don't want everybody to know what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And
Everyone hears a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this.
yeah, not everybody gets the whole truth.
Yeah.
And I gave her hope every time I got out of treatment that I was going to be different this time, that this was the time that was going to work. And just about every single time I shattered that within days, weeks, or months. Um, that's something I get to sit with. I have made amends to my mom, but to tell you I'm not feeling feelings right now from, sharing that would be a lie. I love my mother and she has been a rock to be beside me, and I couldn't be where I am today without her love and support. That's just a simple reality for me. There were so many treatment centers, Florida, California, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Texas, Washington, even one across the border in Canada to, do the ibogaine thing. Um,
Oh,
you
how was
know,
that? Because I've heard about the ibogaine.
well, I had a guide for 72 hours to stand by me, so I didn't do anything insane.
Yeah.
Um, it was clear, it was close to, I think it was in St. Catharines, so it was near Niagara Falls.
Yeah. I was gonna
Um,
say yeah. Yeah. It's yeah.
it did wonders for the physical stuff. However, I got physically sober and I think I went back to smoking weed in 3 to 5 days, and that kicked off the craving inside of me and all that good jazz and the disease. And it wasn't long before I was back to heroin again.
Yeah.
I believe it can be helpful with counseling and therapy and stuff like that. In my experience, it didn't do much for my thought process.
Have you been? Where in Pennsylvania did you go to?
Let's see. There was one in Pittsburgh. There was one in Erie. I didn't go to any in Philadelphia. I think there was one in Harrisburg. Oh, and I think there was one near the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania before you get to Pittsburgh, out in the middle of
Okay.
nowhere.
Okay. I wasn't sure
It's like
because
a
White Deer Run in Williamsport is a big one, and that's not far from me. I'm actually out by I'm in Bloomsburg, which
okay.
is there's like a big fairgrounds and all that kind of stuff where I'm at. I'm in a college town where I'm at, and we're like 45 minutes. We're like Scranton's up here, Scranton's up here, and Harrisburg's down here, and we're right here in the middle. We're like going diagonal between Harrisburg and Scranton.
Yeah.
But I used to live in Hershey, which isn't far from Scranton, and Scranton Harrisburg has a pretty decent recovery community from what I remember
Yeah.
from when I went there. So you bounced all over, and Los Angeles. We talked about that in the beginning. The South,
Yep.
California, Southern California.
Brentwood, Horizons, Malibu, Beachside Recovery. I can't remember all the names,
Yeah,
but I think there were 2 of them where they didn't take us to outside meetings that weren't in houses that were actually like facilities. But most of them were like what you talked about. I can remember the one at Horizons. I got sent to UCLA Medical Center 3 times for my arm because their doctor or their provider there was not happy with the results each time, so he kept sending me back. And I think there was
UCLA in
even,
Westwood, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I used to go to. Like in the city in LA
Yeah.
City, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I used to go to. IOP was in
Okay.
Westwood, and right by UCLA campus in Westwood.
Yeah.
So that's right where the and the only reason I know that is where you went is that's where UCLA medical school is in
Mhm.
Westwood.
Yeah.
So that's why I figured the doctors are there too, the hospital is there too.
Yep.
Um, so okay, yeah. So you and I have kind of crossed paths a little bit at some point. Um, Now, what made this last one? Why did you go to this last one in 2019?
Okay. Unfortunately, I remember this very vividly.
Wait, no, we skipped the blindness. We skipped blind, didn't we?
No, no, it comes
Okay,
when I
okay,
get in recovery.
okay,
I went blind in recovery, in
okay. All right,
sobriety.
we'll catch up to that. All right, go ahead. 2019.
So, I'm getting really drunk. I think I'd just gone to treatment in March and April. I didn't go in May. There was one lined up in Indiana called Savannah near the Purdue campus in West Lafayette. I'd gone and toured it and somehow talked my way out of it. I'm not really sure how that went.
Mm,
I get home, I'm drinking again. I had found out my mom had hidden some money from me or whatever, and I got really mad at her. But there's a piece before that. I would come over to my mom's house to cook with her for dinner at least once a week. And I walked in and she didn't hear me. She was upstairs with the bedroom door open, and I heard her praying for God to kill her because she could no longer watch what I was doing to myself, and she was convinced that God wasn't going to let me die. Um, I didn't take it out on her, but once all that kind of stuff started to come up, I did not get angry. I didn't attack her or anything, but I did pick a knife up and threaten to cut my own arm where that hole was. She did the only thing she could. She called the cops. Of course, I'm on a first name basis with some of these cops. They don't want to shoot me. One wanted to tase me though. However, I don't know, 45 minutes to talk me down, and they got me to go to the psych ward. However, I'm very adept at psych wards by this time. And I talk my way out of a 72-hour hold in less than 24 hours. And as I'm leaving, the nurse looks at me and goes, "The only thing I'm going to ask you to do is not drink today." I think it was 2 hours later, I was on my front porch already drinking. And something went off inside of me. I called a treatment center. I lined one up in Massachusetts again. I think it was Swift River. And I called the interventionist. And I told him I was like. I don't know what to do. I'm so broken inside. I can't even look at myself in the mirror. I don't even know if I can. I'm awake right now. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. And he said, Are you ready to do this?" I said, "Man, I don't know what to do. I'm asking for help." And he said, "Okay, cancel the plans to Swift River. You're going to a place in Tennessee. I'm going to tell you to sit down, shut up, listen, and for once, don't leave." Um, you know, and that's how I wound up at Wonderful Discovery Place in Burns, Tennessee. Um, Of course, I got high again. I can even remember smuggling loaded syringes through TSA to get those, so I had some to be able to do in the connecting flight in Chicago and everything. I was really good at what I did. I got there and I heard this when they got me in the van finally. They'd kind of heard my track record about treatment centers. So they didn't just have somebody waiting at the van, they had somebody waiting when I got off the flight to kind of just follow me to see if I was going to go or not. There might have been some people that knew about my history with treatment centers.
yeah,
Of course, first thing they do is they take me to the doctor. He gets me on like a 7-day taper of Suboxone because he'd heard the amounts of heroin I was using, and he was like, "Holy crap!" Just to briefly go back to that, how bad it got after my dad died. There'd be times I was getting large amounts that usually people are getting arrested for dealing. And I could go through that in 2 or 3 days. I would wake up, and just so I told myself I wasn't completely sick, I had a Bowflex that I would get on for 15 minutes after nodding out once in a while, before I would make my drinks and sit at my table and just sit there and continually shoot heroin until I nodded out again, and then would wake up and get more. Not go get more, but you get more out of the bag.
yeah.
So, I get to Discovery Place. I can, they laugh about this. The first night I got there, I asked, how big is your property? And said, it's about 17 and a half acres. Like, okay, I may go for a jog tonight. And they were like, what the hell is wrong with this man? I did not go for a jog. I'm pretty sure I passed out in my bed. Um, but like I told you on day two, I met Zach L. and he introduced me to the set aside prayer. And that was the beginning. And then there was another man that was already in recovery named Robert S. that came in and did a group one night, and he zeroed in on me. And I didn't know how many treatment centers I'd been to that time. I don't know, 20, 30. I told him. And he's like, holy crap. And he said, well, how are you gonna make this one different? And I didn't know. And he said, how about this for a suggestion? Any group you go into, whether you want to be there or not, or you like the guy leading it, if you don't want to be there, I'm going to ask you to step outside, pray, and go inside and give it 10 minutes. And this is where I met a wonderful man named Bob O. He was going to take us through We Agnostics, and I did that because I thought, what can this man teach me? He's old, he's got gray hair, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And it was probably one of the most powerful experiences I'd ever had, because I'd always skipped over We Agnostics. I already know I believe in something.
Yeah.
But he showed me things in that chapter that I'd never seen before, and we struck up an incredible friendship that you'll get to hear more about when I go blind. Um, I stayed there. I really didn't want to stay any longer, but I was told that I needed to stay, and it was worked out so I could stay for what they call LTR, their long term recovery.
Mm.
Went and did that. Some things started to shift. That's where I started that, because my whole time in treatment by this time, they were like, you get a phone call this week. I was like, I don't have anybody to call. I don't want to call anybody. I don't want to speak to anybody in my life. And of course, my counselor is interacting with my mother. And the last night before I left, he's like, you need to call her. I was like, I don't want to. He's like, no, you're going to call her. She's earned it. And I talked to her and my sponsor that I'd gotten. I have no problem telling you this. We were at the Music City Roundup in Nashville, and I narrowed it down to two people. And sure enough, this guy was sitting behind me. But I wasn't like courageous in going to ask him. I can remember shuffling my feet, looking down at my feet. I need a sponsor. Will you sponsor me? And of course, he says yes. And two of the things he said is, you're going to call me every day. You're going to read On Awakening, and you're going to call your mom every day. And this is where I really found out what I had done to my mom, because invariably at some point in time in those conversations for the next 6 to 9 months, it came up. Are you quitting? Are you leaving? Are you coming home? And that's where, we hear that we train people how to treat us. I had trained her how she needed to treat me. And I have no problem telling you, I'd get so angry inside, and I'd call my sponsor, and he said, you earned that. Until you can show her you can do something different, she has every right to ask you that question. And man, did it cut so deep whenever she'd ask those questions of me.
Yeah. Yep. Now, how long did you stay in treatment for this time around?
90 days.
90 days.
They convinced me. They didn't convince me. So by the end of that 30 days, I was all set to go to a halfway house. Arrangements were made and everything. And I see my old counselor, the director, and some other people all in this room. And they asked me to come in, and they said, hey, we decided you need to stay another 30 days. And by this time, something had shifted inside of me, because they brought all these people to convince me. And I looked right at them and I said, if that's what you believe is best, and walked out. And I remember they came to me later and they're like, well, that went a whole hell of a lot different than we expected it to. We thought we were going to be in there pulling nails with you, but something had started to change.
Yeah.
I went to a halfway house after that. I started volunteering at that treatment center regularly, 2, 3 times a week, sometimes even 5 or 6. And there were times when I was really bad in the morning that somebody in the halfway house said, I'm just going to take you over there so you can be there. And I was
Yeah.
so grateful for those people. Unfortunately, some of those people didn't make it. However, they were of service to me. And I am eternally grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, that's what happens, unfortunately. The closer you get to people in the program, especially early on, you'll find that you start losing people really fast too.
Yep.
You know, and it's unfortunate, but it's the name of the game sometimes. That's why they say you're at a war sometimes, and it's hard to even warn people sometimes, because we're all in this together, and it's a battle out there. It's a fight out there, and not
So,
all of us are going to make it.
so I mentioned it to you in the last one. Here's a simple understanding when you're an ego. A, you have an overstimulated nervous system. Two, whenever you're in worry, anticipation of, or regret, you can only speak from your disease or your ego.
Mm.
And that's that. WAR is the acronym.
Mhm. Now, after that 90 days, where'd you go to, Matt?
I went to the halfway house. I actually have no problem telling you, I stayed in a halfway house for over 2 years. You know,
And then, okay, so and you had said the last 4 you've been working in treatment,
yeah.
but when did you go blind? What happened there?
Okay. So when I was in LTR, there was this wonderful camping trip that we were going to go on, and we were going to whitewater raft the Ocoee. Um, did what I did. I love to play spades. That's actually where I got the nickname Matty Ice, of how I played spades. No emotion, no feeling. I was a mathematical person, so it was really one of those things. I understood I may lose this hand, but the next hand, it's okay. I never overbid. I played the way I needed to, and a lot of people will tell you I was really good. Um, Anyways, we're playing spades or whatever. It's really late, like 1 a.m. I've got a middle bunk and a 3-level bunk thing. And I thought I had judged it just right to launch myself into my bunk. I did not, JD. I took out the middle support and took off the back of my scalp. I
Wow.
didn't know what had happened. I guess I was laying there for like a minute. The bed's covered in blood, but there's only one light on where some guys are still playing cards. And I get up and I go to, like, see what's so wet in the back of my head. And I guess I was standing in the light and you could hear the screams from up above because I
Yeah.
guess I'm like covered in blood. Head wounds bleed
Yeah.
forever. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a picture somewhere at Discovery Place of me with a towel wrapped around my head, completely red from all the
Blood
blood,
soaked. Yeah.
and a staff member sitting next to me, him like this, like, ugh. And I've got $1 million smile on my face. I couldn't be happier. So they get me there, and this is one of my other delusions. I'd had 542 stitches in my head to this point, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get those last 8 to get to 550. Don't ask me why it was a goal in my life. It's ridiculous." And the doctor comes in and is talking to me, and I mentioned that to him. He goes, "I'm not putting stitches in your head. I'm either going to glue it or we're going to staple it. That's just what we're doing." However, he gets to talking to me, and he's over there at his computer, and he decides to type my name in and pull up my emergency room records. And then he looks up at me and he goes, "Do you need help?" I was like, "Well, man, I'm in treatment." And he goes, "No, no, no, no. You misunderstood the question. Do you need help?" I was like, "Well, what are you asking me for that? I just told you I'm in treatment." And he turns the computer around and he starts scrolling through. He's like, "There are over 70 pages in this computer about you for your emergency room records for the year of 2019. He looks at me and he goes, "I've got a psychologist on call 24 hours, can be here in 30 minutes. I was like, "No, no, no, man, I don't need that. Just get the head fixed." And I had believed that I had talked my way into the whitewater rafting trip the next day. There was actually a stream of emails from everybody involved, like, "Get him the F away from the boat and get him back here." Um, Anyways, I was in concussion protocol at their main facility for like 3 days. And then I was allowed to go back to LTR. And one morning at LTR, I'm sitting on the couch for the morning meeting, and my eyes roll back in my head and I fall over on my head. They take me to the emergency room. Of course, they do the CT scan, the PET scan, all that good stuff. And the doctor comes in and he goes, "You didn't have a stroke. However, we believe you could have a stroke at any point in time in the next couple of days." So, newly sober individual, you get that kind of news. I don't sleep for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Nothing happens, but I go forward. I'm in the halfway house, volunteering at the treatment center, and something starts to happen in my right eye. This was a very slow one kind of deal for the retina detachment. And I remember going to a big book meeting that night, and a lot of incredible people in there, and they remind me of this. I can remember bits and pieces of it. We were doing, I think we were going through like 86 and 87 in that book study. And I remember pushing back from the table and standing up and say, "Something's going on with my eye. If you people are the last sight that I ever see out of this eye, I'm okay with that. Let God's will be done." Um, I had told my mom what was going on, and I didn't want to tell anybody else. She had called the treatment center, and they'd sent some people to the halfway house, and they took me to the hospital. Didn't sound like a big deal at the beginning. It was, they said, you've got an ocular blockage. Of course, 2 minutes later, they rush in and they go, "The EMS will be here to take you to Nashville in just a few minutes." That's when I knew it was a little more serious. Um, I don't remember that trip. I'm pretty sure I disassociated the entire way to the hospital.
Yeah, I would say
Uh,
so.
yeah, and of course, they tell me you've lost sight in your eye. Hey, we're going to send you to Indiana for this surgeon. I get up there and he lets me know we're not going to do. He preps me for surgery and everything, and he comes in and they got the last scan of the eye, and he goes, "We're not going to do this." He said, "We've got one shot at this. We need to strengthen your eye with steroids and a number of other things." However, I guess he also studied neurology in his whatever in school, and he pulls up a scan of my brain and he goes, "Do you see all that scarred tissue?" I was like, "Yeah, it's from my concussions." And he looks at me and he goes, "I don't know how you've only lost sight in one eye. I don't even know how you can form a sentence right now. The amount of scarred tissue in your brain is overwhelming." Um, Anyways, I remember going to eat that night with my mom at Logan's Roadhouse and ordering some soup and a steak, and I was not in my body whatsoever because the waitress spilled scalding hot soup on my left arm and I didn't even move. Um, yeah. By this time, unfortunately, the sponsor I did have stopped answering my calls because he was kind of going through his own things because this was during COVID. However, I also believe he didn't know what to say to me because he never dealt with anybody in this kind of
Yeah,
situation.
I would
However,
imagine.
Bob O and the director of that treatment facility picked up and regularly were there for me. Also, that night I got home, I remembered that yes, I was a good addict. I had stored, hid away so many drugs and everything. And I was like, I wonder if they found them all. Sure enough, there was a recess in between my mattress and my spring that I had cut out, and I found two loaded syringes of heroin. I went to the bathroom, and I kid you not, if I would have looked at them for another 15 seconds, I would have done them. 9 months sober, the pain emotionally and physically I was in, but I squirted them out down the toilet and disposed of the rigs. That was a dark moment for me. Go forward, so I'm back
It's a
home,
hard
and
thing to do. That's a
yeah,
very come to terms moment. You of
it
what
was a decision.
fork in the
Either
road,
I'm going to
fork in
see
the
this
road.
out. Yeah, either I'm going to see this out or I'm going to throw it all away. There was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of various other things. So I go back to Tennessee. We're trying to strengthen my eye. I come home from a meeting and I just cooked a fried egg and I'm going to wash the pan out. And all of a sudden, my vision in my left eye starts to go. And I am beyond scared. And in less than 30 minutes, I can't even see the book the plane ticket back home. I have to get a guy to help me. The whole house came together. The next morning, they were taking me to the airport. 6 people rode with us. Here's you want to hear more delusional insanity, bud. I get to the airport and I say, okay, just drop me off. I'm gonna find my way to the ticket counter, through security, to the airport, to the plane. How insane does that sound? Luckily, the wonderful man Randall W. He's a good friend today. He took me in, and I remember he took me up to the ticket counter and he said the words, "This man's visually impaired. He needs your help." He told me what he really wanted to say is, "This man is effing blind." He didn't do that. He walked. They let him take me through security. I got into it with security guards telling me to take off my shoes. I can't even see these things. He's
Mhm.
getting angrier and angrier, and he's trying to explain to him this man can't see. That didn't go very well. Then this is where things get crazy. Uh,
This
First,
is where they get crazy.
oh, they get even crazier in this story, bud. So we get to the first flight, and what we believe was the first flight, but it was the wrong flight. And then they get me to the flight I'm supposed to be at. The pilot doesn't show up because, like I said, this is right after COVID kicked off in 2020, the end of March, March 31st or so. And they don't show up. So they find me a flight to get me not to Charlotte anymore for my connecting flight, but to Chicago. However, the information they gave me is there won't be a connecting flight till 7. Well, once you lose your eyesight, you only have about 72 hours before you can really successfully reattach a retina. And I remember breaking down in that airport and crying my eyes out on my knees after get falling out of the wheelchair. And people came up to console me and pray with me and all those things. And defeated, I got on the plane and I remember crying out to God at that time, "God, I don't know what to do. I'm going to get on this plane, but I'm broken in ways I couldn't believe. Probably worse than when I was an active addict and alcoholic." I get on the plane. Of course, the wonderful stewardess doesn't know what's going on, and she offers me a drink. And of course, I want the drink, but then it hits me. I can't see.
Yeah.
How am I going to drink this? You
Yeah.
know? I get to the airport in Chicago. They're wheeling me off the plane with my ID pinned to my chest, and somebody comes up and said, "Are you Matthew Ignis?" And I said, "Yes." Actually, I didn't say yes. I remember pointing at my chest, and they confirmed it. And they said, "There's a private jet waiting at Terminal 4 to get you where you need to go in time." My sponsor at that time said that you don't need to know who did that. It's only your job when you have the opportunity to pay it forward to the next man or woman. They get me there. They get the pre-op done, put the drops in my eyes to prepare me for the surgery the next day. Take a picture of my eye. At that time, there were only 4 tears in my eye. This information I didn't get until 3 months after the surgery. Here's another piece. So you got to sign to have surgeries done. This is something I could never do again, JD. She hands me the pen to sign, and I got to see it a couple weeks later. It was perfectly right on the line inside. All the letters were the same
Yeah.
size. One of those things you couldn't reproduce. So they rushed to do the surgery, and 3 weeks later, the doctor tells me, "I promised you I was going to do the surgery, but science says I shouldn't have because by the time you came back, there were 8 tears in your retina, and the success rate goes down to less than 5%." Rushing to do that surgery, we did scar the lens. So, we go forward. First off, I'm blind for 2 weeks. Didn't want to accept help, so I crawled up and down the stairs. However, I don't know if you understand how sight comes back. You do not get central vision first, you get peripheral. My experience with this was also, this is where Bob O became in. I can't even begin to say how important he was because he called me every morning. I did have my AirPods so I could at least hear who was calling and everything. And he would read On Awakening to me every morning. And he was recovering from a back surgery. So we were also psyching each other up and getting to be there for each other. But I'd
Yeah.
crawl to the bathroom and my eyes started to get sight. But like I said, you only get your peripheral vision back first. So I could lean and touch the mirror and not see my own fingers, but I could see the ripples in the mirror, and I learned truly how insignificant I believed I was. Um, I was also vaping like a freaking freight train at this time because of the emotional pain and the fear and all these things. Um, Start to get my sight back. There's all sorts of drops you got to put in your eye every day. The doctor says we're out of the woods. Fast forward a little bit, I got my first year in recovery, blind in one eye, barely able to see out of the other. Here's where it really gets good, JD. What I didn't mention to you, completely blind, my mom took me to a car dealership and I bought an Infiniti G37. And the guy thought something was off because I asked him to pop the hood and I'm using my hands and he's like, "This is the deepest inspection I've ever seen before." And my mom looks at the dealer, the salesman, and goes, "He's blind." And the dealer, my mom said, had an ashen white look on his face. He's like, "He's not going to take it for a test drive, is it?" And I let my mom drive it, and it was a great car. I also swapped out the throttle bodies and the air intakes, not being able to see a thing purely by touch. I am delusionally insane, bud. However, I do remember as my sight's coming back, my mom's driving us home and we're in a construction zone around Kentucky, and she doesn't like semis, and she also doesn't drive sports cars that much. I remember looking over out of the corner of my eye, seeing we were going over 100 miles an hour because she decided to pass one semi and another semi.
Yeah.
We're going down the highway at a very high rate of speed. Um, get back. I've got a car, but I can't see to drive it yet for about a month until they would approve that going forward. And then that December, the lens gets really foggy. And even though I was driving, this is when I shouldn't have been driving. I actually prayed for traffic because I could see the brake lights, but had trouble
Yeah.
seeing the stoplights.
Yeah.
Um, then this is where it gets even crazier for you. So they decide to do this surgery. They found somebody that'll make me a lens to put in my eye because I was already 20 over 1300 in vision. So it wasn't very good. I had this really big gas permeable contact, but we're going to take that out and we're going to put an implant lens in.
Were
They're
you getting
putting
bad
me.
headaches at the time too?
Was I what?
Headaches?
Oh, yeah. Headaches were bad because
I
the
was gonna say you
pressure
had
was
to be
going
getting
up.
bad migraines and shit, right?
Oh, buddy, I'd gained so much weight because they had me on liquid prednisone in my right
Yeah.
eye 4 times a day. Cravings came for chocolate. Watch out. The whole store was disappearing. I'm sure you can grasp that.
Yeah.
So they've got me in Indiana for the surgery. There was also another incredible man I met in recovery that was taking me back and forth from Indiana. Great man named Jerry B, former state cop, captain in the Vietnam. Incredible man. He just loved me for who I was, and he would easily drive me from Dixon to Fort Wayne multiple times a year. Anyways, we're getting put under for the operation. Of course, you've done this kind of IV drug use, you might be considered a hard stick. So it took them 4 times before they found a vein that they believed was going to work.
Hmm.
They wheel me back for the surgery. They're giving me the anesthesia, and the anesthesiologist comes in to check everything, and the anesthesia is not going on anymore. The vein had blown out. They are frantically searching for a vein anywhere: my feet, my legs, my chest, my arms. And then he comes to me and he goes, "We can't find one. I'm going to have to go for your jugular." I have no problem admitting to you today, I was crying my eyes out. Luckily, an Army paramedic heard what was going on, the commotion outside. He came in, taps the arm, finds the vein. Of course, all of this took 5 minutes, JD, and I've already gotten most of the anesthesia. So I wake up on the operating table as they're cutting in my head. I hear nurses freaking out, but one nurse had tied my arms together with a sheet. The other one clamped my mouth shut and said, "Don't talk, don't breathe. You need to hold still for 20 minutes." My doctor, a consummate professional, a very Christian man, I could hear him stop and start praying, and then he went forward. Um, I don't know how I didn't move for 20 minutes. I really do not know. The surgery was a success. How I know the hospital was concerned is 3 different times the hospital called and informed me I had the right to sue them. I chose not to. I choose not to sue people today unless it's based on principles. That surgery was a success. I could see better out of my left eye than I've ever seen in my entire life. The joke was I could see better out of one eye than I ever could two. Things really started to pick up after this. I got my first job in treatment. I was working in an accounting firm. And what happened there was one of the owners came to me and said, "You're incredible at this, but this isn't what you want to do with your life." And I said I wanted to work in treatment. She encouraged me to apply, and I applied. And it wasn't even 15 minutes later, I'd gotten a phone call. "Can you be here tomorrow?" The unfortunate story about this wonderful woman named Nancy was she stayed away from everything she could of COVID, but she ended up getting it and she died. So part of my working in treatment is also a tribute to her and
Yeah.
encouraging me to follow my dreams, which at this moment is to work in treatment. But I don't know if that's what it's always going to be. I know things can change. I started working in treatment. I remember the guy who interviewed me was a house manager, and he said, "Well, tell me about your recovery." And I mentioned the amount of treatment centers, and I see his eyes behind his glasses just go so wide, like, "Oh, do we need to be checking this man in and not giving him a job?" One of those things. I loved working there. However, I was extremely codependent. I had no boundaries. If I was asked to work later or do something, I did it. And it was one of those things that made me very, very sick. I really don't know how I survived or didn't drink or use again. I kept going to meetings. I kept meeting with my sponsor, but I was extremely sick.
Yeah.
That eventually caught up to me, and I did something with a staff member I shouldn't have done. I admitted it to one of my higher ups, but it didn't get recorded the way it was said. Later on, there was an accusation of sexual assault and rape. It was found not to be true, but it was decided that we part ways at this time. And today I can say everything happened the way it needed to happen. I wasn't ready to be in the position they had put me in as a therapist. It happened before I was a therapist, but that's neither here nor there. There's a lot of different things about it. However, the company did exactly what the company needed to do. In between that time, I really kind of nailed back down on my recovery, and I was really asked to look at boundaries and codependency, which I didn't want to do. So somebody introduced me to the wonderful book of ACA. I have no problem telling you I was asked to read the laundry list, and a fellow traveler then a week later said, "How many of those do you relate with?" The only one I said I could relate with was the one seeking excitement. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to ask you to pray about it and come back and tell me what you relate with next week." Kind of like what you would expect, JD. I came back and I said I relate to 13 of the 14 and maybe the 14th. And my fellow traveler just laughed at me and said, "We've got some work to do." I also don't have a problem telling you I've not completed the steps in ACA. We got to step 3, and she said, I believe you've gotten what you needed. When you're ready to come back, you'll come back, but keep doing your AA and NA work. And I did. The next treatment center I went to, I had a little bit better boundaries, but I wanted to make more money. So I kind of started to massage those in a way that was not healthy for me. And yeah, I took care of myself and everything, but I was dying inside. So when we parted ways over what we parted ways over, it needed to happen. I got some incredible experience at that facility because it was more of a lower level state accepted insurance kind of place. And it was more about quantity, in my view, than quality, my view, not other
Yeah.
people's. And I learned a lot of things, and I learned I could handle a lot of things I didn't know I could handle. And it did make me a better therapist. That's one thing I can definitely say. In this time, I was sponsoring men. I was doing what I needed to do, and the opportunity to land where I landed came about. And right before I'd left that place, I'd started to find the ice baths, and it was like, this is something I need. This is something that's helping me with my trauma, and my ability to process my own trauma went deeper and deeper. And while working at the ranch, there was two incredible trauma. Well, one was a trauma therapist, and the other one was a doctor that kind of took me under their wing and showed me so much about it and encouraged me because they were like, your ability to learn and grasp this is something I've never seen before. They encouraged me to go into that field, and I have. It's been so rewarding. However, I also know there is still my own trauma to work on. Part of what I told you about being emotionally unhinged this week, I believe it's my own relationship trauma that came to the surface, and my shame and fear around relationships. So that is the opportunity to grow through this, and it's still
Hmm.
incredible to sit here
Yeah.
and tell you, I'm not feeling anything, but I'm also not numb. I just feel all of this energy vibrating and pulsing in me and around me, and it's so strange to not be depressed, to not be angry, to not be upset, to
Yep.
to actually not be blaming myself or blaming the other individual, because I know there's still possibility and opportunity, and there's an incredible spiritual lesson and growth that is going to come from this.
Yeah, there is.
Um, Working at the facility I get to work at now has been a godsend for me, where they took the proverbial ropes off that not most treatment centers do, and I was pretty much informed that I can do anything I want as long as I can clinically document it, unless I'm going to put clients in danger.
Yeah.
Um, that is a freedom that I hold very dearly, because my process generally goes something like this. I might read an incredible book or see an incredible article. Okay, I need to find 3 other sources that confirm this, and then I pass it through my own experience. Do I have the same experience? Am I blocking myself off from seeing this? A lot of prayer work around it, and once I know that, I'll write my own group, or if I use theirs, I make sure to cite them and where it came from. I don't like to plagiarize. I like to make sure people get credit for what they do. There's a number of original things I've written. My whole thing on not believing in right and wrong anymore, just believing in love, is something I've started to find in a couple of spiritual books I've read, but for me, it was something that was very innate. Another thing in recovery where a lot of things changed for me, incredible man named Ron F. around here in Nashville, after you heard me sharing in a meeting about some of my racing history, and the joke was, it's not that I didn't have fear, I had a lack of understanding of the consequences. you know and he was talking to me after the meeting. He asked me, what are you in a race for? I said, I don't know. And he looked at me and he goes, the only thing I know you're in a race for is to get to the grave quicker than everyone else. And that stopped me in my tracks.
As it
uh
should.
because I believe what I said in the meeting, I had 3 speeds: fast, faster, and fastest.
Yeah.
And he just, he's an incredible man, an incredible friend, and a fellow traveler with me today on this journey that has shared so many pearls of wisdom, from things like, if you believe the third step promises are true for you, then there's nothing you can look at and say they're not true for everyone else around you. And Paulo's, if I choose to believe that everyone, or that I am doing the very best I can, then I also get to choose to believe that everyone else is doing the best they can. The book You Can't Make Me Angry has been a formative piece, as well as I have no problem admitting I am a recovering nice guy, as Dr. Robert Glover has informed me. Good old nice guy syndrome as well. That's where my boundaries and codependency work really came in. And another man took me through that book. And I'm so grateful he did, because I'm still getting to do that work
What do you
today.
mean by nice guy?
Well, first off, a nice guy doesn't believe they're a nice guy. A nice guy suffers from toxic shame. A nice guy believes that if they meet other people's needs, they will meet their needs. We get into a lot of covert contracts. How about this? We're not able to ask for what we want in bed. We just want to make sure the other partner is satisfied. Just a couple of things, man. I don't know how deep you really want to go into that.
All right. I can see
Yeah.
myself falling into that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're so nice, and we don't understand why other girls keep picking the jerks, but they're able to ask for what they want. But then as they get to know them, usually those things fall apart. But if a woman does get with a nice guy, the nice guy destroys it by always making it about them and the inability to make decisions. All right, here's one from previous relationships, not anymore, bud. So you would ask a woman where she wants to eat. I don't know. And you get frustrated and upset, because then you would throw a place out and they don't want to eat there. So my process back then was, where don't you want to eat? And it wasn't said with love or kindness. It was like, I want to go eat, but you're not helping. So we would work backwards, and that's another sign of a nice guy. Their inability to make decisions and let it fall where it may.
Well, I would like
There's
to say that I'm already in recovery from that. Then, without even practicing, I'm already in recovery. I feel like, so when I got clean and I got sober, whatever you want to call it, initially in 2018, I is when I changed a lot of all of those kind of habits and ways, as opposed to, stop living for everybody else and start living for myself. And kind of, it's okay to be selfish, and it's okay to, say what you want, and, not beat around the bush and be direct, because I was very beat around the bush before, and now I'm a very direct person.
I get it. I mean, if you really want
Yeah.
to check it out, look up the book. You can find it
Yeah.
on Audible, or you can find some synopsises of it online. It's a very powerful book.
That's cool.
I've had the privilege of taking a number of men through it as well, and each time I take it through it, just like the 12 steps, I learn something more about myself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm so grateful for in recovery is I may know how to do something, but the next time I get to do it with someone else, I'm reteaching myself how to do it. As long as I'm open to that, because that really depends on my own spiritual condition.
Yeah. Now, last question I'm going to end it with is, you start a rehab. You start your own rehab, but you want it to be 12 step based, but
Hmm.
you can only pick one. Which 12 steps would you rather go through with incoming newcomers, AA or NA? And why,
Hmm.
obviously?
That's a deep, deep question. I really like AA because of the promises. However, I also understand that NA is written in a more understandable language. So the truth would be I'd have to do a lot of prayer work around that before I could give you the most complete and honest answer.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, because I've done the steps through AA, and I've started them in NA. I liked AA steps because of how, I hate to say how easy it was. You know, in
Well, it
comparison, this
depend it depends on your sponsor.
on your sponsor, but it's a lot less writing in
Yeah,
comparison to taking a notebook, the workbook through NA, and answering 84 questions for step one, and
buddy. My sponsor had me in Bill's story for 8 weeks, and I had 10 questions each week on based on just the first couple of pages to answer.
yeah,
It was not as easy as you believe it might have
yeah,
been with my sponsor, and I'm
yeah,
so
exactly.
grateful he did it that way.
But that's my point, though. It's different. But I when I got sober in 2018, it was from opiates, it was from alcohol, it was from benzos, it was from everything except for weed and cigarettes. Um, and the reason it wasn't from weed is because I got Cali sober. I went to a rehab called High Sobriety in LA, where they taught you how to use marijuana and cannabis as a way to get off opiates.
Okay.
So, and it worked for a while until it didn't. And I ended up drinking again the following year. On my 13th month anniversary, I drank, and then I went 9 months drinking, And then on leap day of 2020, I quit everything again. And then I went 3 years and a few months without doing anything except for smoking weed. And then my dad passed away. He got to see me clean and sober when he passed. But a few weeks later, I went back to work after taking some time off when my dad got really sick and then he passed. Went back to work. I was so stressed that I called my drug dealer, aka my psychiatrist, and it got prescribed Ativan. And then I abused that right away. And then he gave me Valium, and then I abused that. And then I had a conversation with my wife about me abusing my medications. And April 1st of 2024, I decided I'm going to take a month off work, and I'm going to quit, benzos, and I'm going to quit weed. Because right now I feel like I'm using weed as a crutch. I'm smoking it all day, every day. It's no longer serving me. It's making my life unmanageable. And the most important thing to me, everyone thinks they know what step one being active is. Oh, it's admitting you have a problem. To me, the biggest part of step one is it makes my life unmanageable. That's my favorite part about step one is the unmanageability.
Oh, buddy, I go so deep on unmanageability because it's not that it made it unmanageable. What I have found is the person who said they were managing life well was the one who first introduced it and then
Yeah,
continued to introduce it. For me, unmanageability has to go deep. Not saying for everybody else that's what works
yeah.
for me. I love that because I continually to go back to step one because essentially that's where I am in this situation today is I believe if I fix the problem, manage the problem, or throw all out control at it, it's going to go the way I want it to.
Well, so
Versus, can I step back?
yeah. So when I decided to quit smoking weed too. And I told myself after rehab the first time that now that I'm introduced to 12 steps, that if I ever fuck up again, I don't need to go to rehab. I just need to get back into the program and start going to meetings again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I start going to AA, and within a month, an old timer pulls me aside, and I'm so used to going to California AA, where they're a lot more open to language and verbiage to what you talk about. You can say you're an addict in AA out in California and talk about drugs. Now I'm in conservative Northeast Pennsylvania, and within a month, I get pulled aside by an old timer. He's like, "Listen, you're kind of not following the rules anymore." He's like, "We want to hear about how your discussion, pertains to alcohol and alcohol only here. And you're talking a lot about marijuana and talking a lot about others drugs. And we kind of, if you're going to talk about that kind of stuff, we kind of need you to find Narcotics Anonymous instead." And I was like, "Yeah, but there's none in the area. There's none in the area. I don't know what to do. There's none." He goes, "You got to look on Zoom then, because a lot of us around here, we don't want to hear about drugs, to be honest with you." And I haven't been back since. And it's been a year and 3 months or whatever. I haven't been out to an AA meeting since, because fuck that. You're gonna tell me I can't talk about certain things. I'm not gonna come to your meetings anymore and support your group. And and so I found NA on Zoom, and I
Mm-hmm.
haven't been back since. You know,
It's for me when we get into the rooms, it's about my code is loving kindness and tolerance, and I have a huge yeah, it's a problem. It's not an issue. It's a problem. With people who, Ron F was the one who showed me this, and he said, "I need you to carry this forward." When people want to start talking about relapse doesn't belong in AA rooms, it's actually in the big book a couple of times. Just like there's no substances in the big. No, Bill Wilson was taking sedatives and all.
yes,
It's one of these things that people want to separate things that can't be separated. Or the one
yeah,
that really irks me the most is take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth.
yeah,
What Ron taught me to do when somebody says that, I'd like you to open that book and find for me where shame is a spiritual principle. It
yeah,
might have been what was said to you. However, what recovery teaches me is I'm to be a better man than I was yesterday. And it's one of those things. Am I really attempting to be a better man or a better human on a daily basis? And what worked for me, okay. However, those kinds of people generally shut me down. However, I get it. It helps some people. But once again, if the goal is to be better than I was, how am I practicing loving tolerance? There's a few NA and AA meetings in Nashville that have asked me to kind of stay away for a bit. One guy was losing his crap over some things that I had shared, and I looked at him and I asked, "How's that emotional sobriety working for you right now? It looks like that vein in your forehead's about to burst." I can be an asshole, dude.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. It's one of those things that what I will not stand for is people that run people out of rooms. They came there, and that was the hardest step
Walk through the door.
is the step into the rooms, that first
Yeah.
threshold. And it's
Yeah.
not just to be open and honest, it's also to be inviting, as I have found. And it's one of those things that recovery goes so much deeper for me than I could have ever imagined. I'm so grateful it does. It's led me down so many incredible paths, paths I didn't even know I needed to take or I wanted to take.
Yeah.
However, it continues to teach me on a daily basis that if I don't do these few simple things, how quickly I can lose it. Because I have no problem telling you, Thursday night, when I was completely emotionally unhinged, a drink actually sounded like an option at that moment. And that's when I knew it was like, I got to call a couple of people and let them know what I'm thinking. And it's also one of those things, it hit me like an epiphany. The only way my pain gets bigger is when I think about it. So I go back to good old page 30, more about alcoholism, take out the word drinking and putting thinking. And I really know what the problem is. It's
Yeah.
always been my thinking, how I choose to think, and what I think about.
Yep. Well, it's a pleasure always, Matt. Great catching up with you. I'm sure you'll be back again, talk more recovery, talk more addiction, tell more stories. And I think it's great what you're doing for the community and trauma and, being a therapist and inside of rehabs. It's like the first line defense, it's like being a Marine. You're the first line defense when it comes to seeing the ags when they first come in broken.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot for the community, man, and I love to see it. And I love every time we get a chance to sit down and talk, bud.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, JD. You have a wonderful and a blessed day. And
You too,
thank
man.
you for the opportunity, man. I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yep, I'll talk to you soon. See
All
ya.
right. Love you, bud.